Joshua, it's not what you think. It's about what my wife, Beverly's, last words sounded like before I saw her with her lover and drove him outside in my Hummer. That day was truly extraordinary and completely changed my life. Now I am ready to share my story with you. My name is Joshua and I have been married to Beverly for 18 years. We have a daughter, Ruby, who is also 18. We have raised her together and provided her with everything she needs. Ruby is currently in college. I work and Beverly does the housekeeping. Our family history began when we were both in our 20s. 2 months into our relationship, we learned that Beverly was pregnant. I met this news with optimism, although I wasn't sure what was next for us. The first thing we did after learning the news was that Beverly and I got married. Those times were difficult. Neither of us had a college degree. After Ruby was born, Beverly stayed home and my job situation worsened and we found ourselves without an income. We survived as best we could until we were able to stabilize our situation. At that point, we lived in a tiny room in my parents' house. When Ruby turned 4, my job situation improved and we began to earn a steady income. We eventually moved out of my parents' house and bought a small but cozy house on the outskirts of town. I wanted my daughter to grow up in good conditions, so I found a part-time job, worked during the day at my main job and in the evenings until late at night. It was a hard time, but I'm glad we managed to break free, pay off all our debts and buy a house. 2 years ago, I bought a Hummer, which we had been saving for a long time, and saved up money for Ruby's college education. I advanced in my career, despite not having a college degree, through hard work and initiative. My salary is now quite adequate to support the family we have created. Although we don't live in luxury, we have everything we need. The most important thing for me is the well-being of my daughter Ruby. I have always believed that I am raising her properly. However, my stress increased when she brought home her first serious friend, Andrew, a third-year student at the same college as Rudy. At first sight, I didn't like Andrew. I can't explain the feeling, but I felt my daughter deserved better. I often wondered what she saw in him. Ruby confided to my wife Beverly that she was afraid of my reaction to their secret meetings for 3 months. And indeed, when I found out about it, I was angry. I never showed my dislike for Andrew openly. On the contrary, I tried to be friendly and outgoing, always asking him questions and keeping the conversation going. But in the back of my mind, I felt that Andrew was getting to something, despite his visits to our house. Each time he stopped by, I looked for an opportunity to talk to Ruby alone. One such conversation happened that very day. "Daddy, I don't even want to discuss this topic," Ruby said when I brought up Andrew. She insisted, "As soon as I opened the door, you weren't interested in my opinion. I see it differently. I'm not judging you, I just don't understand what you see in him. He has no prospects, he doesn't even work, and from what I hear, he's a terrible student. It's his only path to a normal life. Tell me, Daddy, were you looking for an explanation for your love for Mom?" Ruby asked. I replied, "No, but your mom believed in me, and I was sure I had fire in my eyes. Unfortunately, I don't see that fire in Andrew." She replied, "That's because my mom got me pregnant and you already had to do it. You don't even have an education and you're talking about Andrew. We've only been together for 4 months. I'm not saying I want to spend the rest of my life with him. I might break up with him in a couple days, but right now I'm totally fine with him," she said. But before I could finish, Ruby interrupted me. "That's enough, Daddy. Close the subject. I'm tired of this," she said. "Can I ask one last question?" I asked. "Okay, but remember that I have the right not to answer if I don't like it," she replied. "Okay, agreed, yeah. Was there something between you and Andrew?" I asked. "Yes, and not just that. When I turned 18, I decided that I was going to decide for myself what to do with my body," Ruby stated. I hadn't expected such a harsh answer. "How long ago did this happen? Why didn't you tell us?" I continued. "That's a second question. We agreed on one," Ruby reminded me. "Besides, Mom knows everything." "So that's it, Dad. Good night. I have to study for my exams," she said. I said goodnight to Ruby and left feeling very disgruntled. Determined to deal with the situation, I went to Beverly's house. In our bedroom, I found Beverly lying on the bed in her underwear reading a book. I didn't immediately express my intentions. "News, dear. Do you know what I just found out?" I began. "What is it, dear?" she asked playfully. "Our daughter had an intimate relationship with a guy." Yes, I know. Ruby already told me, but she asked you not to mention it, Beverly replied. I fell silent, forgetting what I wanted to say. Beverly's reaction made me angry. Why was she defending Andrew? We argued and went to bed in silence, turning away from each other. I didn't understand why my wife supported Andrew and thought he was a good man. She began to defend him when Andrew started staying overnight with us frequently. Unfortunately, Ruby started inviting him over not only for the day, but also to stay overnight. They slept together in Ruby's room. I assumed Beverly was protecting Andrew and allowing him to stay with us because of his difficult situation. Andrew had grown up in foster care, and the conditions there were not favorable, to say the least. I felt sorry for Andrew for losing his parents at a young age, but I still didn't like him. When I got home late, around 11 p.m., I saw Andrew's sneakers on the doorstep, which shouldn't have been there at that time. I was adamant there should be no strangers in the house when I got home from work, which was by 8 p.m. Andrew was supposed to either leave or prepare to leave, but as it turned out, Beverly let him stay without my permission. After that point, we started fighting a lot, all because of Andrew. After the unfortunate conversation with my daughter and Beverly, I couldn't sleep. It seemed like my family was drifting away from me, preferring a stranger who was growing closer to them rather than me. When I got home, there was usually always something to eat. However, on the days that Andrew stayed overnight, I would come back to finish the leftovers because Andrew ate a lot. All these little things were getting on my nerves. It had been a month since I found out that my daughter was dating Andrew. During this time, he had basically started living in my house, eating my food, and courting my daughter. The next day, after a fight with Beverly and an argument with Ruby, I went to work depressed. Ruby was studying for an exam and Beverly was doing household chores. On the road, I wondered if I should kick Andrew out of the house, but realized that my wife and daughter might not forgive me. I never found the answer to my question. The workday started off productively. I had completed all of my morning tasks and was preparing for a meeting where I was to present a new project. Joshua, you have a meeting in an hour and a half. Have you prepared everything? Haven't you forgotten anything? Richard, my boss, asked. No, sir, I am fully prepared, I replied. But suddenly I remembered that I had left all the documents at home. In a panic, I turned to my assistant, told her I needed to leave for about 30 minutes, and asked her to cover for me. Okay, Mr. Joshua, I'll take care of it, she replied instantly. I rushed to my car and headed home. During the drive, I tried to call Beverly to ask her to pick up the papers from the living room and bring them to me, but she didn't pick up. That's when I decided to call Ruby, hoping she was home. Dad, have you lost your mind? I'm still waiting for my turn to take my exam, and you're calling and distracting me. I told you I'll call you as soon as I'm done, she said and hung up. I drove fast and even exceeded the speed limit, for I couldn't afford to ruin this meeting. My immediate bonus, pay raise, and a chance to improve my position depended on her success. When I got home, I glanced at the clock. It was 12:15. Hell, I'd only gotten home in 30 minutes, and the meeting was scheduled for 1:00 p.m. That meant I needed to get into the house quickly and back out again. The front door turned out to be locked, which surprised me because it's usually open during the day, and I never carried my keys with me so I wouldn't lose them. I decided to try the back door, but that was locked as well. Frustrated, I walked over to the kitchen window and heard loud music playing on the second floor. Apparently, Beverly was cleaning and listening to the music. I decided to enter the house through the window. The problem was that it was partially open. To get in, I had to reach through the narrow slit to the handle. Luckily, my stretch didn't fail and I was able to slide it open and climb inside completely. The first thing that caught my eye was the mess. The house was in the same condition as it had been the morning I left for work. Loud music was blaring from the top floor, so I decided to go upstairs. Suddenly, however, I noticed Beverly's phone lying on the nightstand with 3 missed calls from me and messages from Andrew on the screen, but I couldn't read them because the phone was locked. An uneasy feeling swept over me. Why does this guy have my wife's contacts? Or is this normal? With these thoughts, I went up to the second floor. Because of the loud music, I couldn't see anything at first, but as I went upstairs, I heard moans. When I reached the hallway on the second floor, I could clearly hear my wife moaning and spanking. The door to our bedroom was ajar. From it came music intertwined with moans and spankings. I cautiously approached the door. The first thing I saw was Beverly's lacy panties that she usually wore on our anniversary. I moved closer and the scene became clearer. I carefully leaned toward the doorway so I could see better. On the bed, I saw my wife in a crouched position with a young guy standing behind her. I didn't recognize him as Andrew at first. They didn't notice me as they were standing with their backs to me. The emotions at that moment were indescribable. I pulled out my phone and recorded a 30-second video just in case. Then I came up behind him when I was as close as possible. I grabbed the guy by the hair and threw him off the bed with all my might. As he fell to the floor, I finally realized it was Andrew. He lay there for a few seconds, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Quickly, I pulled out my phone and took a picture of his face. Beverly had already seen me. I grabbed Andrew by the hair and dragged him across the floor. At that moment, Beverly screamed, "Joshua, it's not what you think." As I dragged the guy downstairs, the music abruptly cut off. Beverly ran out of the room yelling, "It's not Andrew's fault. It's not Andrew's fault. It was all me. Leave him alone." But I ignored her, and Andrew couldn't resist, because what could a guy do against a 110-pound man? I kicked in the front door. Beverly in her bathrobe ran outside, trying to stop me. I dragged Andrew, naked, across the ground, but just walked around her and headed for the car. When she tried to get in my way, I said, "Leave or he's really going to get hurt right here." She ran away. I opened my Hummer, threw Andrew in the back seat, and told him, "Don't move, got it." Andrew nodded, showing that he understood. As soon as I closed the door, I noticed my neighbor watering the lawn. His face was full of surprise. He was in shock. "Anthony, don't worry, it's a learning process. The kid will be fine." I yelled to my neighbor and was about to get in the car when my wife came out of the house and started yelling at me. "Joshua, if you leave now, I'm going to call the police for kidnapping Andrew." I realized that my wife had lost her fear. So I asked Andrew, "Dude, did I kidnap you?" "No, no, no," he replied. "Go yell the same thing to my wife you fooled around with in my bedroom today," I told him. He yelled that it was okay, and we left. 5 minutes into the drive, Beverly started calling me and then my boss called. I had already forgotten about work, so I just turned off the notifications. After another 5 minutes, Andrew asked me, "Are you going to kill me?" I replied that I didn't want to go to jail. "I've got something more interesting in mind," I said. 40 minutes later, we pulled up to the main entrance of the college where my daughter Ruby had exams today and was due to graduate soon. Over there, I said to Andrew. Andrew wanted to say something, but I said more forcefully, "Come out now. Get out and stay where you are. If you move anywhere, it will be worse." Andrew nodded and carefully opened the door, stepping outside. I quickly stepped aside and began to watch from a distance. Andrew stood naked, covering his lower body with his hands, which were shaking with fear. In my mind, he was like a hero seducing my wife. He could have just run away or not gotten out of the car. He was a coward and weak. After all, who was I to make him do anything? But I was amused that he followed my instructions. 3 minutes later, a crowd of students gathered around him. They were perplexed as to what was going on and what he was doing there. Some guys started laughing at him and throwing scraps of paper at him. Some were taking pictures, others just stood and watched from the sidelines. Suddenly, Ruby came out of the main entrance. There was no smile on her face. She probably called Beverly first, and Beverly told her that her, like tyrant father, had kidnapped her boyfriend. The funny thing is, it turned out to be true. Beverly actually told Ruby and painted me as a monster. I quickly walked over to Ruby to keep her from getting close to Andrew. At this point, Andrew started yelling at Ruby and calling out to her. I started to approach Ruby, but she started to move away from me and went in the complete opposite direction. At this point, Andrew tried to run towards Ruby, but some guy stopped him and pulled him to the ground. Someone called the police on Andrew because he dared to show up in such a state outside the school. I followed Ruby after yelling that I would explain everything, but she quickened her step and I had to run after her. Eventually, she also ran to call for help. I realized it was pointless to go back to the car. I saw the police car they were putting Andrew in. I smirked at the car, decided to turn on notifications and saw a message from Ruby, "Don't ever come near me again." There were also 6 missed calls from Beverly and 23 missed calls from my boss. It wasn't good. I didn't know what to do with myself, so I went to a bar and stayed there until morning. I started the evening with a beer and ended the night with a whiskey. At the bar, I met some guys who I told my story to. They didn't believe me, so I showed them the pictures. They were shocked. The morning after, I didn't get behind the wheel, but called a cab and drove to the hostel. There I spent 2 days, bought a pen and notepad, and wondered what to do next. I wrote to my supervisor, briefly explaining the situation. He seemed to understand me and advised me to get in touch as soon as everything was sorted out. So on the second day, I turned my phone off. I finally developed a plan, wrote down all the risks, and realized it was time to go home. My main goal was to stay on good terms with my daughter. I realized that she would be against me at first, but I hoped that in time she would understand me. After driving 500 meters, I was stopped by the police and had to go to the station. As it turned out, Beverly had written a report against me that I had broken into the house in the afternoon, first hit her, and then kidnapped Joshua, forcing him to stand naked outside the college under threat. It was also stated that Beverly had suffered domestic violence at my hands for 3 years. But what surprised me was, for the most part, it was Ruby's statement that indicated the same thing. At first, I was perplexed. I had been accused of domestic violence. Initially, I demanded my lawyer. That same day, I wrote everything as it actually happened, attaching evidence, videos, and pictures. I stated that Andrew went voluntarily with me, and my neighbor, who was watering the lawn at the time, confirmed this. He confirmed that Andrew did not resist or hear any threats. My neighbor also mentioned that I was calm and he never saw anything suspicious. I also clarified that Andrew left the street near the college on his own. I did not forcibly pull him out. Meanwhile, Andrew was arrested and my statement was taken later. Beverly and Ruby arrived with a lawyer. They were called because their testimony was completely different and they had no evidence. Ruby didn't even look at me while Beverly cast a dismissive glance in my direction. I felt resentful of the way my wife had treated me. The lawyer told me that Ruby was unaware of any connection between Beverly and Andrew, but would find out at the depositions. My lawyer's prediction turned out to be true. When Ruby came out into the hallway, she hugged me tightly and began to apologize. She explained that her mom had told her a completely different version of the story. In anger, Ruby agreed to perjure herself to punish me. However, her opinion quickly changed when she was shown the pictures. I didn't hold a grudge against Ruby. I was just glad she believed me. A couple months later, we officially divorced in court, sold the house, and split the amount between us. Beverly had to pay me a substantial sum for making false accusations. Andrew was released, but he was expelled from college and had to leave because everyone laughed at him when the truth came out. My supervisor understood the situation and rescheduled the hearing. During this time, I made corrections and improvements to my paper, submitted it, and it was approved. I received a bonus and double my salary. I bought a smaller house and got a fancier car. Ruby decided to stay with me, at least until she finished college. Beverly moved in with her parents and had to get a job to compensate me. Ruby doesn't want to talk to Beverly, and I totally understand her. Oh, life has calmed down in general. I just want every listener to realize that there may be situations in life that you never anticipate and you need to be prepared to make decisions. Do I regret for a while what happened? Yes, but now I realize it's a great excuse to start over. I'm taking more time for myself, going to the gym, and most importantly, paying more attention to my daughter. I can safely say that I'm doing well, and I hope my story is helpful to you and that you take away something important for yourself. I don't wish this experience on anyone, so good luck to everyone. Thank you for listening to my story. The channel presents the story of our subscriber who emailed it to us. We had an idea to create a separate forum where our viewers could share their stories. It doesn't matter if something happened to you or your friend, buddy, coworker. You can share your story, and we will insert it at the end of the video every time. What do you think of this idea? Write your opinion in the comments. If we get enough feedback from you, we will implement this idea. Now let's get back to the story. Do you think the main character made the right decision by acting immediately rather than waiting a couple months to gather evidence? Why did the main character's wife decide to sleep with her daughter's boyfriend? Was this an isolated incident? Write your opinion in the comments. And that's where we'll end. Subscribe to our channel, put a like, and don't forget to smile a lot. Good luck!
Thank you so much for watching my video and your time. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button. Also, I am very interested to know your personal opinion about this story. You can write it in the comments. I will definitely read it and reply to you personally.